stand up to the bully or sell your soul to the devil. That's the decision that universities and law firms are finding themselves in. To me, it's a pretty easy decision. You fight the bully. You stand up to the bully. You punch back at the bully. But you have a lot of law firms and universities tapping out. We previously reported here on the MeidasTouch network about Harvard's powerful rejection of this quote unquote agreement in principle that the Trump regime tried to stuff in Harvard's face. That's how Trump wrote this letter. You shall sign on the dotted line and hereby agree that the Trump regime gets to audit the political views of the student body. We get control essentially over your admissions process. Anything that has to do with diversity, you need to cut out. And we also want to be involved in who you hire and who you fire. Make the Trump regime your dear leader. You become a vassal institution. They didn't use those exact words of the Trump regime. This has been kind of a form letter that they're sending out, the Trump regime, to all universities. Can somebody say Mao Zedong, like literally attacking the educational institutions and trying to control it from central planning? Like, do we see what's going on here? Public and private universities alike. But now we're seeing a lot of other universities follow in Harvard's footsteps, like MIT. MIT wrote this letter. Their president, Sally Kornbluth, wrote the following. Dear members of the MIT community, I write to bring you up to date on developments in two areas where recent government actions are interfering with the normal functioning of MIT, diminishing our ability both to serve the nation and attract the world's finest talent. Pause there, because I think that's an important point. Like, Donald Trump's destroying every aspect of America, destroying American business, destroying the dollar, destroying the stability in our markets, destroying our educational at all levels, including our top research and academic centers, which are the envy of the world. You know, there's a lot to criticize about the American education system in general. A lot of improvements can be made, and a lot of my critiques also have to do with the gutting and attacks on public education by right-wing people and oligarch people, but that's a topic for another day. But regardless of what your views are on education as a whole, United States at the highest elite level education is undisputably the leader of the world. But now Trump wants to attack that as well, and that's what he's doing. So I thought that line by MIT opening up the letter with that's important. They then go on to say, filing additional lawsuits. They go on and say, as I've communicated before, we're responding to certain federal actions by going to court. In February, when the National Institutes of Health imposed a sudden cap on indirect cost reimbursements, we sued. Then it goes on to say, this Friday evening, the Department of Energy imposed a cap similar to that from NIH. DOE announced that grants to universities and it would no longer cover indirect costs. We went to court on that. It goes on to say, it's also focusing on trying to make sure that the university remains a safe place for students. So international students don't fear that they're going to be kidnapped and sent to extermination camps. Here in the United States, we see tourism down, foreign travel advisories into the United States based on the authoritarian regime that is the Trump administration. Now, Harry Litman, I mean, look, educational institutions play such an important role in our country, right? They are so critical to how we also recruit some of the best talent in our companies. And there's been brain drain from other countries into the United States where, help build some of the best companies. Our educational facilities here have always been kind of a great beacon of international law. And I remember when I went to Georgetown Law, by the way, Georgetown standing up to the Trump regime as well. Shout out to them. You know, we would have international students, and that cultural exchange was invaluable to my education as well. But then you see the other, like Columbia and Cornell, who seem to be going down the opposite path. Law firms. There's, the one model, the Sussman Godfreys and the, and the other good firms. And then you've got the Scaddons and the people who are tapping out. Harry, make sense of it all.
Okay. Well, first, I think the point you just made, Ben, and the one that the MIT president led with, it's first, almost everything you can point to in terms of scientific advances is part of what's been an extremely productive for all concerned. I mean, American citizens, whether they even go to college, research project as a result of the general partnership between universities and the federal government that he is completely trashing. On your brain drain point, U.S. leads the world in Nobel Prizes, but guess what? More than half of the Nobel Prizes that the U.S. has been garnered come from people who weren't born in the U.S. They came here because, just as you say, this is where the best and brightest come, and for all these good reasons. And now, of course, it's going to be where the best and brightest avoid, because God knows what visa troubles await them on the other side in the former promised land. Those two, fight the bully back, or make a deal with the devil. The Harvard range, it's just typical, but we saw it because the president wrote back everything you said. Here was another little detail. Every single professor must undergo a plagiarism review. And that's, a nasty reference to the way Claudine Gay was forced out after her testimony. But tell me, what in the world that has to do with combating anti-Semitism? A laudable goal, but one that Harvard A says we've done all kinds of things for and will show you, and B is a pretext here because they just want to, as you say, put the university into receivership. Now, over, Columbia, well-heeled, but they seem to be really contemplating signing on the dotted line. I'm reminded of the literal story in The Godfather, offer you can't refuse. Luca Brasi assured the person that either his signature or his brains would be on the contract. And that's literally what these schools are looking at. Now, Harvard, I think, maybe has a hard road to hoe, but they had very strong support in the student body, and the faculty almost couldn't go any other way. And I think they're prepared for some lean days. And I don't know if I'd call it tighten a belt when your endowment is over $1 billion, but I think they're ready. We've been here since the middle of the 17th century. We're going to wait you out, Trump, if that's what you force us to. But it's, obviously a privation. But the idea of what they're trying to do to universities, leaving aside legally, let me say quickly, it's an unbelievable violation of the First Amendment, freedom of expression, academic liberty, and the like. Of course, Trump's little trick here is, and then this is what I think the Columbias of the world, like the Scaddons of the world, have figured out. Yeah, it's unconstitutional. Yeah, we can sue. Yeah, we can win. But then they're still going to find a way to sort of take it out on us. They'll still, you saw Harvard wrote the letter, and just last night they canceled a couple $1 billion or something in grants. So to stand up to a bully is the right thing to do. It's not as if it's cost-free, but just as each capitulation makes the next one easier, each pushback, I think, makes the next one easier as well. Chris Eisgruber came out of the box really strong for Princeton. I think that's given steel to the spine of Harvard, MIT. Hopefully you'll see more. And of course, if everyone bands together, this is true in the law firm arena as well, then he really can't, he can't make it fly. But he's been able so far to kind of divide and conquer and pluck individual schools or law firms off and make it very hard for them, and people have not been able to band together. But that is what's going on. And yeah, good for Harvard for, punching a bully in the nose.
You've got the Canadian Association of University Teachers, which boasts members of over 72,000, recommending in an advisory published on Tuesday that academic staff travel to the U.S. only if under the most essential of circumstances. Yeah. It's like traveling to North Korea.
Right.
That's how it's viewed. If you're in Europe, Australia, Canada, why would you go to a place where they can literally, without due process, send you to a concentration camp in El Salvador? I remember, I'm not sure whether I share this or not. I remember my dad's advice to me when all of my friends in high school were going on spring break abroad to other countries. And he said to me, there's no habeas corpus in other countries, so there's nothing that we can do, if you and your stupid friends, if anything ever happens.
No joke in Turkey, right? Yeah.
And so he would never want me, I remember what he would say.
Yeah.
And the idea now that it's actually much safer to go abroad, than it is to go into the United States.
Because there's no habeas corpus in the United States, you could say, at least for some people, right?
Well, and when you see Donald Trump and Bukele in the Oval Office and Trump says, I need you to build out 5 more facilities for the homegrowns.
Right.
And then Donald Trump goes and posts about who he believes to be the homegrowns are. And those are people who are, political opposition, people like Adam Schiff, people like, Liz Cheney, and people like Jack Smith and New York Attorney General Letitia James in the first tier. And then, another tier is probably me and you and other people like that, on a very close, second, if not in the first tier. But, and then they go for everybody. There's no one who's immune from any of this. I mean, that's the thing. Like, we talk about Abrego Garcia, we talk about, this university, that university. What we need to be clear is that the end game is to assert full hegemonic authoritarian power over all apparatus, the way Hitler did in creating synchronicity in Germany. Control it all, do what you want. And fortunately, right now, Harvard's resisting. They didn't have that happen in Germany. People are opposing. We have learned. There's a good here, Harry. We've seen some of those lessons, and the opposition, resistance is growing and getting stronger. And Trump is flailing and being exposed as not competent. But you and I will do.
Courts are holding firm so far.
Exactly. We'll do more videos on that. Everybody hit subscribe now, but more importantly, subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel, the Talking Feds YouTube, the Talking Feds Substack, the Talking Feds podcast. Subscribe. It's where I get my legal news from. So you should too. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.